I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural, but that was before I ended up in Riverton. A small town like any other. Quiet, quaint, and full of history you'd never expect to be haunting. I remember the day I first saw the woods. I had just moved into the old house on Oak Street, a property I bought for practically nothing. It was all too perfect, too good to be true. That afternoon, I took a walk, trying to clear my head. The wind had this strange, cold bite to it, even for early October. I strolled past the town's tiny shops, people waving, offering smiles that were a little too stiff. It was like they knew something I didn't. As I reached the edge of town, there it was, the woods. Tall, dark, and creeping right up to the edge of Riverton. Something about it pulled me in, an unsettling energy that I couldn't quite place. But I wasn't one to back down from a curiosity. So I stepped off the paved road and onto the dirt path leading deeper into the trees. I didn't know then that I was making the worst decision of my life. First, it was just quiet, the kind of silence you can feel in your bones. As I walked further, the air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating. I thought I heard something, like a soft whisper, but it was just the wind. Wasn't it? But it didn't sound like wind, not the way it brushed through the branches. Then, I saw something flash between the trees, a figure, person, or something else. I froze, staring into the shadows, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as the sun dipped lower behind the trees, I saw it more clearly. Something tall and thin, too thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. It didn't move like a person. It was as though it was part of the forest, blending with the darkness. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. A voice, soft but clear, whispered my name. Adam. I whirled around, heart pounding in my chest. Nothing, just the trees. But the air felt alive, electric. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I should have left then, but I couldn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound, every creak of the old house, made me jump. I was on edge. And then, around 2 a.m., I heard it again. A whisper, but this time it was much closer. Get out! I sat up in bed, my body frozen, heart racing. The voice wasn't just in my head. It was real. I knew I had to leave Riverton, but it wasn't going to let me. The next morning, I did what any rational person would do. I packed my bags and was ready to leave. But as I walked outside, something stopped me. It wasn't the house. No, it was the woods. I stood there, staring at the line where the trees began. It called to me, like a dark siren song, urging me to go back. I shook my head, telling myself I was just exhausted, that it was all in my mind. I couldn't explain why, but I turned around, walked back inside, and locked the door behind me. But that feeling, the sense of being watched, never left. It followed me around the house. It lingered in every corner. I couldn't escape it. I tried to distract myself. Work, cleaning, anything, but nothing worked. Every time I glanced out the window, I saw shadows moving between the trees. Not animals. Something else. Something wrong. I could feel it in my gut, that primal instinct to run, but I was too stubborn to give in. Later that evening, I received a knock at my door. It was Sheriff Miller, an older man with a weathered face and a presence that seemed to fill the room when he stepped in. His eyes were dark, tired, and when he looked at me, there was a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "I heard you were walking around the woods yesterday," he said in his slow drawl. His voice was calm, but his gaze was sharp. "Yeah, just needed to stretch my legs," I replied, trying to sound casual. But there was a nervous edge to my voice I couldn't hide. He nodded, as if considering my words. "You should be careful. The woods aren't like other places. Folks around here don't talk about it much, but there are things that shouldn't be disturbed." His eyes flickered to the window, and for a moment, I swear I saw a flicker of fear cross his face. "What things?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, then sighed. "It's the kind of thing that gets in your bones. You hear whispers. You see things that don't make sense. People go missing, never found. You ever see anything strange out there?" I hesitated, thinking about the figure I'd seen. The tall, thin thing that wasn't human. My pulse quickened, and I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I nodded. "You're not the first," he said quietly, "but you might be the last." Before I could ask what he meant, he stood up. "If you're smart, you'll get out of here, Adam. It's only a matter of time before it finds you." And with that, he was gone. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. I couldn't shake the thought that the thing I saw in the woods hadn't been a figment of my imagination. It was real. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. Those tall, thin limbs reaching out from the darkness. The whispering voice calling my name. I had to know more. But when I stepped out into the night, the whispering started again. "Adam?" I turned, but there was nothing there. Yet I knew it was watching, waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the shadows, the feeling of being hunted. I had to understand what was happening in Rivorton, what was lurking in those woods. I couldn't sleep, and the pressure was building inside me, suffocating me. So I did something stupid. I went back to the woods. It was just past midnight when I pulled on my boots and grabbed a flashlight. The town was asleep, and the streets were eerily quiet. Even the usual nighttime sounds were missing. There was no chirping of crickets, no rustling in the trees. The night felt empty, hollow. I walked out of the house, and the cold hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't look back as I crossed the boundary into the woods. Couldn't. Something told me if I did, I might never leave. The trees loomed over me, their branches twisting like gnarled hands reaching for the sky. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I shined it on the dirt path, guiding me deeper into the forest. Then I heard it again. The whispers. It was faint at first, just a soft murmur, but it grew louder the further I went. The voice, it was clear now, was calling my name. "Adam, come closer." I wasn't sure if I should keep going, but I couldn't stop. I was drawn to it. The trees seemed to close in around me, their shadows stretching longer, darker. My breath caught in my throat as I saw something ahead. A figure. Person? No, not a person. Something tall, thin, its limbs too long, too bent. It stood motionless in the darkness, facing me. "Get away from it, Adam!" The voice echoed in my mind. It was Sheriff Miller's voice, but distorted, like a warning. It's not real, but it was real. I could see it, hear it. It was right there in front of me, staring with eyes that weren't eyes. They were black, endless pits, and they stared into me like they were seeing every thought I had, every fear I'd ever felt. Without thinking, I took a step forward. I shouldn't have. I couldn't have known what was about to happen. As soon as I moved, it tilted its head, its body jerking in an unnatural way. And then it spoke, but not in a voice I could understand. It was more like a series of guttural sounds. Hissing, growling, like it was trying to rip its way through my skull with its voice alone. The air around me went still. The whispering stopped. There was only the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I should have turned around. I should have run. But instead, my feet were frozen in place. The thing reached out toward me, and I felt an overwhelming pressure on my chest, like a heavy weight was being pressed down on me. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, and panic surged through me. The thing was coming closer. Its arms were reaching, its fingers stretched out, too long, too wrong. And just as it was about to touch me, the ground beneath me cracked open, like the earth itself was rebelling against it. I stumbled backward, falling to my knees, gasping for air. And that's when I heard the voices. Dozens of voices, all whispering, all calling my name. But they weren't coming from the woods. They were coming from the ground beneath me. The earth was alive. I scrambled back, feeling the roots and dirt shift beneath me. The trees weren't just trees. They were part of something older, something darker, something alive. I ran. I don't remember how long I ran, but I didn't stop until I was back in my house, slamming the door behind me, heart racing, chest heaving. I leaned against the door, sweat pouring down my face. That's when I saw it. A shape standing outside my window. Tall, thin, Black eyes. It was watching me, and it wasn't alone. The shape outside my window didn't move. It just stood there, staring into my soul with those hollow, black eyes. Couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. But there was no time for logic, no time for explanation. I had to act. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran into the kitchen. The flashlight I'd brought with me to the woods was still on the counter, and I grabbed it, clicking it on. The beam of light barely made a dent in the overwhelming darkness of the house. Every corner felt like it was closing in on me. I could hear the soft creaks of the floorboards above me. My house was old, creaky, but this was different. It wasn't just the house settling. Someone or something was walking above me, slowly, methodically. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys, but before I could open the door, I heard a knock. The sound made me freeze. It wasn't a normal knock. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. My blood ran cold. Couldn't move. I didn't want to move. Couldn't even breathe. But the knocking continued, growing louder, more insistent. Then the whispering started again. Soft at first, like it was coming from the walls, but growing louder with every passing second. The walls were alive with the sound. My name was echoing from every direction. Adam, Adam. I couldn't stay in the house. I knew that now. I ran to the back door and yanked it open. But there, standing in the dim light of the yard, was the thing from the woods. Its limbs were elongated, twisted, and its black eyes were locked on mine. It wasn't alone anymore. There were others, more shapes, more figures, standing just outside the light's reach, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear, but it felt like an eternity. Then, from behind me, I heard the door creak open. I didn't turn around, but I knew someone or something was coming in. I could hear its footsteps on the old wood floor, and they were getting closer. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted out the back door and into the yard, the night air cold against my skin. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. The thing from the woods was still there, watching, its head tilted like it was studying me, waiting for me to make the next move. As I ran down the dirt path leading toward the town, I noticed something strange. The streetlights were flickering. They were dim, almost as if they were struggling to stay on. And every time I looked back, the figures in the yard were closer, inching toward me like they were crawling through the shadows. I thought of Sheriff Miller's warning. "It's not real," he'd said, but this was real. I knew it was real, and it was coming for me. I heard the sound of something crashing behind me. The door to my house had slammed open. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't anything normal. Something was inside now. Something was after me. My legs burned as I ran faster, but the figures kept following. The trees were moving now, their branches twisting and reaching out like clawed hands. The earth seemed to rise up in the distance, as if the entire town itself was slowly sinking into something darker, deeper. I didn't know where I was going anymore, but I couldn't stop. I didn't dare look behind me. The fear that gripped me was primal, bone deep. I could feel them getting closer. The whispers were louder now, clearer. "Come back, Adam?" I stumbled, my breath ragged, my heart thundering in my ears. And then, just as I thought I couldn't run another step, I saw it, the town. I was almost there, almost safe. But as I reached the edge of the woods, I saw Sheriff Miller standing in the street, just ahead. He wasn't moving, just standing there, like he was waiting for me. I stopped dead in my tracks. His face was pale, his eyes wide. And then I saw it, the thing standing behind him just out of the light, the same figure from the woods. It spoke in a voice that didn't belong to anything human. "Welcome home, Adam." I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, spinning in slow motion as the thing behind Sheriff Miller loomed closer. Its limbs stretched impossibly long, and its black eyes were now filled with something far worse than the cold emptiness I'd seen before: hunger. A deep, ancient hunger that I could feel clawing at me from the inside out. Sheriff Miller stood frozen, his face slack with fear. He was no longer the man I'd spoken to. He was just there, a shell, a puppet of whatever had taken hold of this town. "Sheriff!" I shouted, my voice cracking. But he didn't move, didn't respond. The figure behind him stepped forward, its movement jerky and unnatural, like something twisted in the woods was pulling it along, forcing it to follow a path it didn't want to take. "Adam?" The voice was the same, that whispering hiss that had been chasing me through the trees. It seemed to crawl under my skin, dragging my every thought into darkness. It wasn't coming from the thing directly, though. It was coming from inside my own mind. "Adam, you've been called. It's your time." I felt a pressure on my chest, as though the air itself was thickening, suffocating me. I backed away, desperate to break free, but the figure was too close now. Its shadow seemed to stretch across the street, enveloping everything in its cold grasp. "Please, no," I gasped, stumbling backward. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. Every step I took felt like I was being dragged back, as though the ground itself was refusing to let me go. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, and I spun around. The trees were moving again, this time in unison, as if they were alive and hungry. The branches swayed and twisted, their shapes forming into dark, distorted faces that howled in silent agony. The ground trembled beneath me, and I realized that the town wasn't just being watched. It was being consumed. The whispers grew louder. They were everywhere now, filling my ears, clouding my thoughts. "Come back, Adam. You belong to us." And then, I heard it. A voice that wasn't the thing's, but a human one, coming from the direction of my house. "Adam, get out of here. Now." It was Sheriff Miller. But this wasn't the same voice I'd heard before. This was desperate, frantic, filled with fear. He was still standing, but now he was fighting against whatever force had taken hold of him. "Run!" he shouted, his eyes wide with panic. "Run, Adam." The sentence was cut off. Miller's body jerked violently, like he was a marionette on the edge of being torn apart. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his mouth opened in a silent scream as his body collapsed onto the street. The figure stepped forward, its hands, no, its claws, reached out, brushing against the sheriff's lifeless form. For a moment, there was only a deathly silence. Then, with a horrible, wet sound, Miller's body was lifted from the ground, as though it were being pulled by invisible strings. Couldn't watch. I turned and ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My breath was ragged, and every step felt like it might be my last. I heard the sound of something chasing me, something fast, something desperate. The streets were empty now. The town was silent. I was completely alone. I reached the edge of Rivorton, the woods looming behind me, the dark figures still watching. My skin crawled, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I needed to get out. I needed to survive. But just as I was about to leave the town behind, I saw it. A figure, standing at the entrance to the forest. It wasn't just any figure. It was me. I froze. It was an exact replica of me, but wrong in every way. Its skin was pale, its eyes black, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. It stared at me with that same hollow hunger. "Adam," it whispered, its voice cold and empty. "Welcome home." And that was when I understood. The town, the woods, the creatures, the whispers. It wasn't just a curse on Rivorton. It was a curse on me. The thing that had been chasing me was not just hunting me. It was waiting for me to join it. And now there was no escape. I stood there, frozen, my own doppelganger staring back at me with those dark, void-like eyes. It wasn't me, it couldn't be, but it was. Every detail was perfect, from the fraying of my jeans to the smudge on my left shoe. But the thing in front of me, it wasn't human. It was the embodiment of the curse, the one that had haunted Rivorton for as long as anyone could remember. "Welcome home, Adam," it repeated, its voice like nails on a chalkboard, hollow and empty. It was mimicking me, feeding off my fear, showing me the twisted reflection of what I'd become. I took a step back, but it mirrored my movement, its grin widening as if it could feel my panic growing stronger. The figure didn't move, but I could feel it crawling under my skin, pulling at every fiber of my being, like it was trying to claim me. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile illusion of control I had left. The thing cocked its head, its neck cracking loudly, a sound that made my stomach churn. It smiled wider. "We didn't have a choice," it said. "You were chosen just like all the others. Welcome to the end." My body shook with terror. My breath was coming in shallow gasps as I stepped backward, still trying to distance myself from the impossible. There had to be a way out. There had to be. But no, I knew deep down that this was it. This was the price of curiosity, the price of wanting to know too much. This town, the woods, the whispers, the shadows, they had been waiting for someone like me, someone who couldn't walk away, someone who had to know. And now it was my turn. The ground beneath me trembled. My legs buckled, and I collapsed to the dirt. The creature, my reflection, stepped forward, its limbs stretching unnaturally long, its fingers reaching toward me, pulling the very air away from my lungs. It was so close now that I could smell the decay, death itself on its breath. I heard the whispers again, but this time they weren't just in my mind. They filled the air, coming from every corner, every shadow of Riverton, every twisted tree. They were calling me to join them. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. My limbs were frozen, my body no longer responding. I was powerless against the thing before me. It was too late. With a sickening snap, the doppelganger bent down and touched my forehead, sending a wave of cold through my entire body. I felt my vision blur, my sense of self slipping away like water through my fingers. And then the darkness took me. I woke up in a place I couldn't recognize. It was still Riverton, but it wasn't the town I'd known. It was wrong. The streets were twisted, the buildings